Over the past few days, a lot of us have been sitting here just scratching our heads, trying to figure out what actually happened in this Gene Hackman case. But, ladies and gentlemen, we are not alone. We are not alone. This case is so weird, and maybe weird isn't even the word to use. This case is so unique that it has drawn the interest of people all around the world. I'm talking about experts in the medical field and the criminal field. Everyone seems to be intrigued by this case, and they've been speaking out about their thoughts and their theories. And in this video and in future videos, I want to go over a lot of these theories and a lot of this information that is being released by these experts. Because it's one thing when someone like me or someone like you, when we look at a case and we think it's weird or odd. But you see, we got folks who have been working in this line of work, like I said, regardless if it's the medical or the criminal field, they've been working in these lines of work for sometimes longer than I've even been alive. So it's interesting to hear their insight and their thoughts, and a lot of their thoughts and opinions kind of line up with ours. But one person I want to hear from first is the Santa Fe fire chief, who recently spoke with some news outlets. And of course, because, he's kind of loosely involved in this case, he can't just come out and start spewing out theories, but he does kind of give a hint at what he thinks happened. I want to go ahead and dive in real quick. Santa Fe Fire Chief Brian Moya is sharing his opinion about when Gene Hackman and Betsy died. Moya says, and listen, this sounds weird. I don't know why he worded it this way, but this is how it is worded. Just because both bodies were in similar ways, where we as experts, sad to say, that we know a lot about how people die and how long people are dead for, both bodies are in a similar manner, that it could be a similar time frame. Moya was not a first responder to the 911 call to Hackman's home. He was told that the property sprawled over 9,000 square feet and consisted of 3 structures. The fire chief explained that his paramedic told him once he returned from the Hackman residence that Gene, Betsy, and their dog were all found in the same building. Moya says that since he's been fire chief, which has been for 3 years, the Santa Fe Fire Department and Emergency Medical Services have not responded to any calls at the Hackman residence. So I'm not sure why he worded things that way, but what he was trying to say is that they were found so close to each other. This is a large home, all right? Yeah, sure, maybe they were found in a slightly different area, but they were pretty close to each other considering how big this home was. So because of that, he thinks that the deaths happened, right around the same time frame. He doesn't think this is a case where, Gene died well before his wife or his wife died well before him. He thinks it all happened kind of in the same time frame. And if you look at a lot of the evidence here, I think, it looks like that is most likely the case. What I found most interesting about what he had to say is that he had been the fire chief for 3 years, but in the past 3 years, they had not received any 911 calls, no emergency calls from Gene Hackman's residence. Now, we know Gene was not in the best of health. I think Betsy was kind of healthy. Listen, I'm not in their personal lives, so I don't know, but from everything we've been told, Betsy was kind of healthy. So knowing that there had been no 911 calls at this home, at least for 3 years, for Betsy or Gene, it makes you wonder, what health were they really in? Of course, Gene was 95 years old. We know that he wasn't doing well. But I think, Betsy was doing pretty fine for her age. We have to remember that she's much younger than Gene Hackman. So knowing that there had not been any recent 911 calls due to any health problems that Betsy may have been going through, I think that clears some of my questions up just a tidbit. Not all the way, but just a tidbit. But like I said, this case is attracting the attention of experts from all over. And A pathologist was just speaking out, explaining that this case is going to be difficult to solve because of how long Gene and his wife were in that house undiscovered, decomposing. And we know that at least one of the bodies was partially mummified, which is going to complicate things so much more, at least according to this pathologist. Let's listen to what they have to say really quickly. When you have bodies that are decomposed or haven't been seen, and especially with people who haven't been seen for a while, the first question in terms of trying to figure out what happened is figuring out the time of death, says forensic pathologist Judy Melinek. And one way of figuring out the death or the time of death is to look at markers at the scene, indicators of when was the last time they were alive. And those tend to be more reliable than the anatomic markers once the body is badly decomposed. In the early phases after death, we can rely on things like rigor mortis, the stiffening of the body, or algor mortis, which is the body temperature, she says. And we can use those to try to narrow down the post-mortem interval, but once the body's decomposed, it's a lot harder to do. Melinek says investigators try to narrow down the timeline by things like scene findings and circumstantial evidence. When was the last time they were seen alive? When were they found dead? When did the mail start piling up? That indicates that nobody was going to the mailbox to pick it up. So you could tell from the date stamp on the mail when was the last time they logged into their computer or opened their cell phone or called anybody. Melinek also says that with bodies that have decomposed for 10 days or more, they start to fall apart. And there's going to be certain organs that disintegrate and are no longer showing the markers that could help us figure out whether they were working or functioning properly. Mummification also complicates determining who died first. You're not going to be able to tell from the post-mortem changes because once you get to mummification, then all bets are off, says James Gill, a chief medical examiner with the Connecticut office of the chief medical examiner. It depends where in the house they were. What were they wearing? All sorts of things can affect the post-mortem changes. Once you get to that mummification stage, there's nothing to be able to distinguish the two deaths time-wise. Generally, dry environments, a person will mummify more quickly than in a non-dry environment, he says. Was that bathroom drier? What if the heater was on? That certainly could explain some advanced mummification. Heat generally accelerates decomposition. What kind of clothing are they wearing? Is he in front of a window when the sun's coming in? Or is she in a closed room with no windows? All those factors can play a role in how quickly someone decomposes. So a lot of the things that they would look for, a lot of these markers that they would look for in someone's body, within their organs and things of that nature, a lot of that is out the window now because we know that, at least one of these individuals that was found was partly mummified. And I say at least one of these individuals because details that we got early on, they keep changing. And that happens pretty often. It's something I was warning people about. But I'm just not dead set on a lot of the details that we've gotten so far. Because if I was dead set on these details, I would believe that the front door was wide open. But now they say it's the back. If I was dead set on these details, I would have thought that, hey, it was this German Shepherd dog that was dead. Now it's a different dog. So details are changing. And I do find that kind of weird. I don't think there's nothing really nefarious going on or anything like that. But there's just some things that investigators missed. Or maybe they misspoke. And these key details really matter in a case. So as of right now, because of how much these bodies have decomposed, it's going to make this situation a lot harder when trying to figure out who went first and at what time. Because right now, that's kind of what I think that's really what they're trying to determine here. Because if you know who died first, it helps you, paint a clearer picture. How can we move forward without knowing who died first? Because if Jean died first, I think that gives us a lot of different scenarios that could have happened with Betsy. But if Betsy died first, I think we have a couple of different scenarios that could have led to Jean dying as well. So it's very interesting, and that's what everyone is trying to find out right now. Who died first? Because if Jean died first, I think it makes this whole situation, it makes it a little more, I don't want to say interesting, but it raises more questions if Jean died first. If Betsy died first, then I think that most likely the excitement, Jean trying to get help or something along those lines, maybe he fell trying to get help, and we know that his heart wasn't too well and he had a pacemaker, so maybe the excitement, caused him to just pass out or pass away, however you want to put it. But if Jean went first, then you got to kind of question, well, what happened to Betsy? Because Betsy seemed to be, in way better health than Jean. She was also like 30-something years younger than Jean. So I think that's where the mystery lies. Because we have someone like Gene Hackman involved in this case, everyone's focused on Gene. And I mean, it's understandable because he's like the famous actor in this story. But if you ask me, Betsy is where my curiosity lies. Like, Betsy is the main character of this story. Figuring out what happened to Betsy is really more important. I think the mystery is really wrapped around what happened to Betsy as opposed to Jean. Because someone at Jean's age, you just kind of accept when they pass away. You know what I mean? So it's really going to be hard trying to figure out what happened to Betsy, though, because Betsy is the one, at least that what we've been told so far, is the one that started, showing signs of mummification. So getting details from Betsy's autopsy, it's going to be harder than Jean's. And as far as the dog, listen, they got the dog totally wrong, which I think indicates that they didn't even do any tests on the dog. I don't know if they did any tests on the dog to figure out how the dog died. Because if the dog died due to consuming pills, I think that's different than the dog dying due to being locked up in a crate, Because if the dog's locked up in a crate, it could indicate that this is something that suddenly happened. It all happened spur of the moment. No one had a time to let the dog out. No one had time to do this. But if the dog died from eating pills that were laying on the floor, I think that says something different. But who knows, folks? The mystery continues. The experts are continuing to weigh in. I'll be back with more updates on this case very soon. So ring that notification bell. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Don't be scared. You may be scared to share your opinions and thoughts on other channels. I'm open to everything down here in my comment section. So comment below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, and I'll talk to you all very soon in the next video.